Markle creatively bankrupt, unable to figure out a new angle for a podcast because, as it turns out, according to reports, Meghan Markle was going to release a second season of Archetypes, a show everybody didn't like, nobody really wanted, nobody asked for, nobody needed. Nothing in the zeitgeist could tell Meghan Markle that reviving Archetypes was a good idea. It was a failed project. Spotify canceled them after she released it because it wasn't good. And yet, for some reason, she has decided to release a second season or maybe releasing a second season. What the heck? Because I think there are so many better roads to go down, and releasing her series and podcast at the same time might have worked, but might have not. What the heck is going on with Meghan? Because this definitely isn't hermiting as she claimed she would be after a catastrophically awful January for her and Harry. So we are going to look at this today because I was like, what? What? This came across my news feed and I was like, I thought that died a decent death because it should have died, but apparently Meghan cannot let it go. So we are going to explore this. But if you haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany and I provide compelling royal commentary. So feel free to hit that subscribe button. We do have just a couple more days for the exclusive deal to get a free ring. If you spend over $500 with Ana Lucia Diamonds, you can still always use my code Royal20 to save 20%, but the total has to be over 500 before you use it to get that free ring. So guys, feel free to check that out. Link is up above. So Meghan Markle, I guess, enjoys torturing me in particular because, oh man, when I saw that maybe Archetypes was coming back, I was like, really? 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 Because that show was bad. It was objectively bad. And I can say this because I listened to at least a couple of episodes of it. Not only was I unimpressed, but honestly, it's a slog to get through. Meghan Markle, you can feel the script. You can feel it. The obviously scripted laughter, the obviously scripted sighs. Like you can actually feel the words on the page in parentheses. Meghan, sigh dramatically here, pause dramatically there. Like you can feel it. And the series was very convoluted, I would say, because it wasn't just Meghan having a conversation with someone. She had to talk to an expert, allegedly. We know she actually did not talk to a lot of the people that she interviewed, allegedly, that she would talk to these experts, talk to celebrity, talk to a couple other people. It was a mess. And the whole idea and premise of the show, I'm sorry, I just thought it was a little ridiculous. The whole idea was that essentially we need to talk about the archetypes, which is really stereotypes, by the way, stereotypes of women. And I don't think this show did particularly well. And we see this evidence in the reaction to with Spotify. So, when it came to its initial run on Spotify in 2022, by the way, and between them, we've had major things happen in the world. And so, I am of the opinion that Archetypes is like 12 steps behind the curve. But, anyways, Meghan Markle released Archetypes and it went to the number one spot in Spotify. But the reality is, and we all know this is true, the number one podcast in the world is the Joe Rogan Experience, which is exclusively housed on Spotify. So the idea that Meghan Markle's podcast, one single episode, was somehow outpacing Joe Rogan made zero sense. In fact, I went through and like for individual episodes, she didn't even make it into the top, I think, 5 of individual podcast episodes. You cannot be number one and not have your podcast episode be number one. That's not how this works. They aggregated it, I believe, based on popularity, social media comments, all these sorts of things. And so Archetypes only had a measly 12 episodes, and it was painful interviews Meghan Markle would do with celebrities while her staff would do interviews with others. In fact, the Vanity Fair piece once again reiterated how many staff members there were. She didn't even come up with the idea. The whole idea of Archetypes is just, I feel like, so passe, so behind the times. And the premise just didn't work because Meghan Markle is in a bit of a pickle. And it's the reality of the world she's living in that I think she refuses to really acknowledge, which is that her pretentious, contrived persona doesn't sell. It doesn't sell. This is the season of authenticity. This is the season of small media outlets gaining a lot more traction oftentimes than mainstream media outlets like mine. I look at my stuff sometimes, I look at my videos, and I look the next day in the Daily Mail. I'm like, I just talked about that. I was like, did they take that from me? Somebody else? Were they already working on it? I'm not entirely sure, but I have a feeling and a sense that sometimes I know I drive other media stories because they're looking for more things to talk about. And Megan is just not one of those people. And why I think sometimes my channel and others like mine do better than some of the mainstream news outlets is that I'm authentic. I don't change my voice into the newscaster voice like some people ask me to, because I'm like, I don't want to do that. To me, it seems fake. And I think what people appreciate anymore is somebody who has an authentic voice, who is more than willing to share it with the world. And Meghan Markle, of course, is not one of those people. She is utterly contrived. She's utterly fake. And I don't think she realizes that her perspective on this matter is not one that's really going to generate much buzz anymore. So she really should have rethought archetypes, because I'm looking at archetypes going, okay, so you were on Spotify and it tanked in the ratings after a couple of weeks. Like, yeah, it started off at number one, but every single week after that, and I did stop tracking, but basically every single week after that, it got into infinity in the ratings because it wasn't good. It wasn't compelling. It wasn't something that I felt like anybody was really thinking, oh, this pushes an envelope or anything like that. People were like, well, this is okay. It's sort of not natural flowing because she has to insert herself constantly in there. And it's one of those things where people enjoy listening to conversations. They don't want to listen to somebody trying to drive and control the entire narrative. And so obviously, after Archetypes tanked, and knowing that their previous iteration, which was a podcast with Harry and Meghan together talking to famous people, also essentially tanked, Spotify dropped them. Spotify dropped them. And they dropped them for good reason. The content wasn't good. It was apparently in the Vanity Fair pieces, once again reiterated. I have a whole video going over it in excruciating detail, all the things that were shared in there, which focus a lot on Spotify and how much of a pain she was to work with, and how basically she drove people to therapy because she was so awful. That's what the Vanity Fair is reporting. Vanity Fair is not a outlet like TMZ or Perez Hilton or something like that. It is a mainstream outlet with huge influence and good reporting. Although I will say the article overall had definitely some cohesion issues. So Harry and Meghan lost this $20 million deal, and they were dropped because it sucked. So nothing happened for a year. They were dropped in 2023. In early 2024, Lemonada, it was actually in January, was like, yeah, we'll pick this up. But there was a change. So Harry and Meghan allegedly, for the initial Spotify deal, were supposedly going to get $20 million. Now, they only got a small cut of that. The reason is they couldn't meet the performance metrics. You'll see other celebrities who can put things out weekly, if not bi-weekly. Meghan can only to get together 12 episodes of a podcast. There are 52 weeks in the year. I do videos, multiple videos every week. I edit everything myself. How in the world, with a woman with her staff, can only do 12 stinking episodes? It doesn't make any sense. And she's not even following what people are normally doing anymore. And so Spotify was like, this is not worth it. We built them a podcast studio allegedly in their house. We gave them all the resources in the world. And these two nincompoops still couldn't get anything together. So they dropped them. So knowing all this stuff that's gone on with Spotify, Lemonada does pick them up. However, they're not giving them any cash up front. Meghan only gets a cut of whatever the distribution is and the advertisers, what they're paying to get on her podcast. That is what she got. Now, the podcast, when it was the first week on iTunes, did well, you could say. I'm still not sure quite why, because Spotify is free. I could listen to all of that stuff on Spotify for free. How does it make a difference if it's on Apple Tunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever? Let me actually see right now how it's doing on Apple Podcast. So Archetypes currently right now on Apple Podcasts, I bet you it's not ranking anywhere, is currently has only a 4-star rating, 917 reviews. Meghan Markle is a huge international figure, and yet she can only get 917 reviews. So that's not necessarily great. It doesn't look like there's anything where we can see where it's trending. Some person says, I'm thankful Megan made these episodes and I wish there were more. This is the first podcast I've ever listened to and I enjoyed it immensely. Lots of thought provoking content and great insight into how we are typed. Thank you, Megan. Does anyone want to bet how much that was paid for? So it looks like here we've got a lot of thoughtful, inciting, authentic, raw, inspiring. All I can think, oh, blessings, heavenly. I think this person shows up on my live streams. Aw, blessings, William. I wonder, I have somebody who's blessings heavenly. I wonder if it's the same person. And I bet you there's multiple people just artificially inflating this. I hate just learning about Megan's podcast after all this time. What, have you been living under a rock? That makes no sense. I wish she could promote her projects on social media from a personal account. Okay, and then she just got a personal account. Okay, this seems very coordinated. I just pulled these up just out of sheer curiosity, and I swear, guys, right now, I am utterly convinced that these are paid for, to be honest. Oh my gosh. Anyways, Megan is polished and well-spoken. No, she's like utterly scripted, faked, and contrived. She's presenting important topics and handling them with care. She's really not. Oddly enough, my only critique is that she's so good at this that she's functioning like a seasoned journalist. And I would love if she'd be less polished and kind of chatted with friends. That is actually my critique of Megan. She's not a seasoned journalist. She's heavily scripted. She's literally reading from a script person. If you don't know that, then I have a river in Antarctica to sell you or something. A bridge in Alaska is what they say. And guys, I don't actually script any of these. Sometimes I have like 3 ideas at least to put down. I spitball these things. That could be good. That could be bad. I don't really know. If I script myself too much, I kind of mess up. But Megan's script, you could hear the script. You could feel it. It was so tangible. It was ridiculous. But I won't force you guys to listen to it. If you want to listen to it, you are welcome to. I just thought objectively it was bad. And it says at the end, but she's way too classy for that. She's way too classy to be authentic. I highly recommend this podcast. Okay, I feel like all those are way, 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 way too over the top. I want to see. Give me an embarrassing move all around. So, could this podcast be any more boring? No. Anything this insufferable narcissist produces is always garbage, through and through. Wish I would be financially compensated to listen to this phony podcaster. So I feel like there are a lot of paid for reviews here that are overly glowing. But the reality is, she was let go from Spotify for a reason, her and Harry. So they managed to get Lemonada to pick them up, but no money. And they put it on Apple iTunes, which gets a little bit more exposure. But this podcast was a failure. Now, there are instances where television shows that were successful were picked up by other programs after being canceled on their particular networks. Last Man Standing is an example. And I the show was hit and miss for me because really liked Tim Allen, but the changes in cast and everything and the issues meant I didn't really follow it after a while. but there was some of it that was really good. And I understand why it was maybe canceled, maybe due to Tim Allen's political leanings and maybe picked up by somebody else, and it did another season or 2. And then you also have something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I thought was really good and I think did fairly well in the ratings and was dropped unceremoniously by NBC because sometimes they're switching directions or whatever, and then picked up by another network. And so, interesting questions abound. When it comes to Lemonada, yes, re-put Megan's podcast on other channels, maybe it'll do well. But this was a failure. This was a failure. It was not good. Anybody who could be objective could say, hey, this wasn't good. Not to mention the fact it doesn't fit in with the current zeitgeist of where things are at. It wasn't authentic. It was very, very scripted. So Megan's deciding to not rethink things, but simply redo something that we know failed. And I just can only think that she's sort of creatively bankrupt. She has nothing new to offer, nothing interesting to talk about. Even the idea for the show wasn't hers, it was somebody else's that she took, yes, and was able to go forward with, but it wasn't initially her idea. So she can't even create the idea for the show. And then when push comes to shove, instead of rethinking, she literally goes with the exact same thing. I think there is something to say for knowing that something failed, knowing that something didn't do well, and evaluating that and doing something different. Now, while this podcast could be very different, I'm not sure. I would imagine it's probably the same thing. Why? Because that's what Megan has always done. She is constantly stuck in a similar loop. She can't think outside the box. She can't do new things. She is constantly stuck in the same 2014 mindset again and again. I mean, think about it. Why did she relaunch an Instagram? Everybody's moving to TikTok, X, and YouTube. Those are the big, I mean, I'm on those a lot, so that's partly why, but those are really the big platforms that are moving and shaking in the social media space. Instagram's still there, but it's not the big thing that it was. And I feel like everything, even her show, even the way the new With Love Megan is designed, feels like it harkens back to the past, not the present. And you can have something be nostalgic in a good way, but I feel like people will watch Megan's series and go, who the heck was this made for? What even time was this made for? Because Megan is not creative. And I feel like if she relaunches Archetypes, she's just proving that to be true. Yes, it might get some initial watches like the first one did, but it's going to tank in the ratings after that because it's just simply not good. People didn't enjoy it. It's hard to listen to. It's not enjoyable to listen to. So I thought there was a really interesting, thought provoking last sentence here in this Telegraph article, which says, but the Sussexes haven't noticed. This is in reaction to their very out of touch responses to the California wildfires. They're still mindlessly parroting outmoded slogans and cluelessly clinging to yesterday's trends. To borrow one of the left's favorite phrases, they're on the wrong side of history. And I think this is incredibly true. Meghan Markle is completely out of touch with, I think, the broader audience out there. Yes, she will still have her sycophantic fans. Yes, there will be people who really buy into her political leanings. But I think that's a dwindling group. And I think even some of the people who generally agree with her, maybe on some things politically, think she's really out of touch with the current environment. And Meghan cannot reassess. Meghan cannot take in input, take in criticism. She constantly thinks everybody's just after her. She constantly cites her victimhood status instead of saying, hey, maybe if I adjust things, maybe if I recognize that some things aren't going super well and take in that feedback, maybe, just maybe, things might get better for me. But I don't think Meghan Markle is there. I don't think she can do it. And this is why I think she's creatively bankrupt. She's going back to an idea that already failed instead of rethinking and relaunching with something new, unique, and interesting. Yes, maybe Archetypes got some views when they put it on iTunes and it trended for a hot second, but is it still getting views? It took her an entire year to finally get what? Another 12 measly episodes back together? Seriously? Again, I will say, I do multiple videos per week, edit them all myself, get them all out myself. I do it all myself. It's not easy. I even just sent out my newsletter today for the first time in the wild, the Royal Wires. If you want to check that out, link is down below. That I spent a lot of time on. All of this stuff takes time. She has all the resources in the world, and it goes back to failure because she can't think of anything else. And even that idea was allegedly from somebody else. And she even watered down that. I don't know what the future holds for Harry and Meghan. Build product is generally not a good idea. So guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support, and I shall see you again very soon. Bye.